You know, it's a good way to practice some quilting techniques: trapunto, free motion stitching, strip piecing, that's flip and sew, quilt as you go. We're going to be making some kitchen items today on the Baby Lock Accomplish. I call it kitchen stitching. It's a great way to practice, and you get some cool stuff at the end too. I'm Cathy, and this is Sewing Tech Talk. So we have a pretty nice giveaway for today's video. We have a lovely assortment pack of Wonder Clips. There's 10 mini, 10 regular, and 6 of the jumbo. But wait, there's more. A great wrist holder so that while you're sewing or quilting, you can keep them on your wrist and keep them handy. Super great prize. Every time you like, share, or comment, you're entered for a chance to win. So good luck. So today we're going to be doing some quilting techniques, and it's a great way to practice if you're a new quilter or you haven't done these kind of techniques before. I'm going to be making a double pot holder, which has the 2 potholder handle pockets, and this is made actually out of 4 2.5 inch by width of fabric strips, something that you might get in one of those jelly rolls. The back of it is just really a 1/4 yard, and the one I'm making today, I'm using some pre-purchased quilt binding. You can make your own, of course. I have an instruction handout that comes with actually all of my videos, but it gives you all of the fabric requirements for this and the step-by-step instructions, so you don't have to take notes, just sit back and enjoy the video. So we're going to work on this one first, but also what we're going to do is we're going to practice some free motion stitching, and I'd like to show you a kind of a simple technique to create trapunto. Now what trapunto is a raised area in your quilting, and it really pops out. So if you're doing some sort of quilt design where you want it to stand out, then trapunto is for you. Great fun technique, and we're going to learn how to follow a line, and I'm going to show you an easy way to transfer. Enough talking, let's get to stitching. So let's start with our double pot holder here, and it's really just a flip and sew technique. And let me show you, I've got it started. And like I said, the instructions are in your handout, but basically you're going to take the 1/4 yard, which is 9 inches by width of fabric, and lay your quilt batting on the top. Now in the potato bag especially, I'm using all cotton materials, and it's not a bad idea to use it for this as well. So this is going to be like a double pot holder. Mine has 1 thickness of cotton batting. You could put multiple thicknesses in if you're concerned or you use really hot stuff, but this just has the 1 layer of all cotton batting. So I laid the first strip, I laid it all together, backing, batting, and I laid the first strip along the edge, and I just basted it down with a very long stitch length. I'm using the Baby Lock Accomplish today. It's a straight stitch quilting machine animal. It's great for quilting, and to make the stitch length longer, I really just turn it all the way over to 7. I get a really big stitch that's easy to take out. Easy to go back to the regular stitch length, which I'm using just a little bit over 2. So the very next thing you're going to do is we're going to do a flip and sew technique to create this little pot holder. We're creating the whole strip, and then we're cutting the pocket parts off. So you're going to base the first one down, and then the next one, what you're going to do is you're going to lay it right sides together with that first strip. Kind of hard to tell because I'm using a black fabric here. And then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam through all the layers. That quilts it and pieces it at the same time. It's a super time saver. Now, we're making a double pot holder, but there's no reason why you couldn't do a giant quilt this way. You could make a big quilt and just put the strips on and quilt it as you go. It's a super way to get a quick, fast, and easy quilt. So, after you sew the first seam, you're going to flip it open. I would take it over to my iron, is probably the best way to do it. Make sure everything is nice and flat. Then you're going to find your next strip. Here's your next strip, and you're going to lay it right side down on that previous strip. Now I'm going to take some pins and I'm going to pin it down. I'm going to take the pins out as I sew, and I am going to sew a 1/4 inch seam right along there through all the layers again. Literally, that's all we're doing. We're just continuing to go across this piece with the 4 strips to get our quilted potholder piece. So here we go. Now I have on the Baby Lock Accomplish, it comes with a walking foot, and I'm quilting as I'm piecing, right? So I left the walking foot on. What a walking foot does is it lifts up the top of the presser foot, which is right here, and it lifts that up as you sew. So it's like a little hopping bunny, right? So as you sew, as the feed dogs pull the fabric, this top part gets lifted up when the feed dogs are doing their pull the fabric through. That means that you get more even feeding. And that's kind of important, isn't it? I don't want this strip to move around, and I don't want it to scoot with the batting. So that's why I'm using the walking foot. Also on the Baby Lock Accomplish, there is something called a pin feed. And what that does is there's a tiny little pin, when I have engaged it by simply putting the lever on this area right here, is as it pulls the fabric forward, it doesn't just use the feed dogs. There's a small pin that comes up, pierces the fabric right along the seam line and pulls it through. So it means that even if you have something bulky that you're quilting and or piecing and quilting at the same time, everything's going to be pulled through nice and evenly. So it's not the machine fault if I get this messed up. So I have it on my pin feed, I have my walking foot, I have traditional quilting cotton in the top and the bottom. Let's get going. So I'm going to take this here, I'm going to pull it over to the side, take my next strip, lay it right side down. Remember, I probably should have taken this over to the iron and pressed it. And I'm going to sew like about a 1/4 inch seam. Now, if you don't get, on this particular project, if you don't get a perfect 1/4 inch seam, that's why it's great for a beginner project. It's okay, no one's going to know. You're going to want to shoot for that, but not that big a deal. So here we go, we're going to lay this down, lay this on the top of it, and I'm just going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down, adjusting as I go. You gotta be careful. Baby Lock Accomplish is a racehorse. So if you press down a little bit too hard on that foot pedal, she's gonna take off like a rocket. She's very responsive and slow, but don't press down too hard because you're gonna be piecing like the wind if you do. All right, so I sewed my next piece on. It's called flip and sew because you sew it, which should be sew and flip. Sew it, flip it on over, and then I'm going to get my next piece of fabric and then I'm going to add it on. Now, I'm going to go ahead and continue, put the last piece on here. Then, after that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my cutting table, just use my rotary mat and cutter, and I'm just going to trim off the edges. If my fabric, with the fabric, is not quite the right length, if it's a little bit short or a little bit long, that's totally okay. It's just a pot holder. It doesn't have to fit anybody or a bed or anything like that. So I'll trim it off even, and I'm going to cut off 2 9-inch squares off the end to form my little pockets. We're going to turn them sideways, bind the one edge. Well, you'll see when I come back. So I'm going to finish this last strip, I'm going to go trim it, and I'm going to come right back. But first, I'm going to show you one other thing that I'm going to do. This is going to be the back of my potato bag, and this is designed to use 10-inch squares, which you can get as a pre-cut as well. And a pre-cut is something that's already cut. You can buy a stack of them. The advantage for that is you can get a variety of fabrics and like a whole collection of fabrics, and you don't have to buy a half a yard of each one, which is pretty cool. So basically what I did the same process I just did with the strip piecing. I layered everything together. This is going to be the back of my potato bag, and I just stitched along. I used the pattern to basically just stitch it together. Now I'm stitching it, I'm using muslin on the back, and I'm just stitching it pretty close together because I'm guessing that this is probably going to be washed and dried quite a bit. So I'm going to finish doing this. I'm going to put the rest of my strips on. I'm going to give the one edge of this a trim, and I'm going to give 2 squares and a trim. It's all in your handout, and I got some work to do, and I'll be right back. So with the cutting mat and rotary cutter, I went ahead and I trimmed up my piece. It turned out to be about 8.5 inches wide. That's perfect. If it's a little bit different, that's okay. So I trimmed up the 2 ends, and I trimmed up the one edge so that it's all even. Now, if you're new and I say rotary cutter, mat, and ruler, and you're, what's that? Oh my gosh, my partner in crime, Michelle, has a video blog, and she did a whole segment on cutting rulers, mats, and how to cut and all that kind of fun stuff. So I'm going to refer you to that because she did a stellar job on that to show you exactly about that if you've never done it before. But so what I did is I trimmed that edge. Now this turned out to be about 8.5 inches wide. So I cut off 2 segments off the end, and I cut them the length that they are wide. So they turn out to be squares. Got it? Okay, now what we're going to do, we're actually pretty close to the finish line. I did some binding around both of the parts of the 2 little pockets that are going to be on either side of the potholder. We're going to talk about that when we're going to bind the whole thing together. But basically what it is I'm using pre-packaged binding. I thought that might be nice and easy for people. You actually can make your own. I do have a handout for that as well. So, at any rate, so all the instructions are in your handout. And what I did is I sewed the binding on, and I'm going to take it to the back. I changed over to red thread. This is basically what that looks like. The potato bag we're going to make pretty soon does that same technique as well. So you learn it once, you get to use it multiple times. So basically what you do is you open up the prepackaged binding, and you just sew along this one fold. Now, prepackaged binding is kind of special because when you look at it, here's a piece now, when you look at it, it's all folded, and one side is folded a little bit shorter than the other side. That's on purpose. This is the side with the shorter edge that you're going to sew to the top of your project, right in that fold. Then when you fold it down and around, that extra length accommodates the width, the thickness of the quilt. Okay? So the big part goes on the back. The shorter part goes on the front. Don't think they did it wrong when they put the package binding together. So that's basically the process there. So you put it on the edge, raw edges together after you trim it, of course. I clip it on with my Wonder Clips, which are your friends. Sew along there, and then what you're going to do is you're going to take it around to the back, and this time for sure press it, pull it around, because you want this edge here to match that front edge, and kind of fuss with it a little bit because you want to be able to catch it in there. Oops, Wonder Clip the wrong way. And then bring that all around. Do both of these pieces. Now I'm going to show you the next step, and I want to show you how to turn a corner with the binding as well. So the very next step is you take your 2 pieces and you lay it on both of the ends of your potholder piece, right, with that bound edge on end, and then we're going to bind this whole outside edge. And of course we're going to turn the corner. That's what I would like to show you. And so I basted it down using that big stitch I talked to you about before. Now I put wonder clips on when I put my binding on just to hold everything in place, but I'm trying to hold 3 separate pieces. So, you know, I just go ahead and baste it. Sometimes basting it is your friend also. Okay, so let's talk about doing that corner. So where is my binding? Here it is. Now let's check it out. Let's find the correct side because we know that now. And I actually take my binding, even if it's a pre-packaged binding, and I actually kind of soak it. This binding is red and it did bleed a little bit. So I think that's a good idea just to go ahead, and I didn't put it through the washing machine or anything like that, so it kept its creases, but I do dunk it and then let it dry. Okay, so we know what to look for. Here is the shorter side. So this is the side that's going to be sewn onto the top. So it's going to be the other end, obviously. Here we go. There's that shorter side. We're going to take it, we're going to open it up. Now, we talk about all this in the handout, but what you're going to do is you're going to leave a big tail when you first get started. Lay it with the right side up of your project, and what we're going to do is we're going to stitch right in that crease. I've switched over to some red thread in the top and the bobbin. I left my walking foot on because it works great. Now I want to show you when we come to the corner. If necessary, you can trim this on up when you layer the two together. If this was a big discrepancy, it wouldn't be enough to hide it in this binding. This should be okay. So we're going to lay it like that, get our mighty wonder clips. Once you play with wonder clips, you don't go back. They're pretty amazing. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch up to this corner. I want to show you how to turn the corner. Oops. Turn your stitch length back, just saying. What I'm doing is I'm stitching right in that crease. Now, technically, you want to stop sewing the same distance from the end that your seam width is, right, of your binding. And I found that that's really hard to calculate. So I don't even bother to do that. I stitch almost to the end and take everything out. Now here's the trick. There it is, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to fold it over just like this. Oops. Just like that. And I hope you can see that. So this edge here doesn't want to cooperate, of course, because everybody's watching. You won't have this problem at home. Fold it over just like that. You see how that's coming straight out that way? Okay, now all you do is you fold it straight back over that edge, and you make all these edges here line up. That's lined up with the other part, that's lined up with the edge. Take your mighty wonder clip, put it on there, put it on there, and that's going to be, I guarantee it, an absolute perfect corner when you sew it. Remember, I didn't bother about where I stopped because it just pulls away anyway, and it just finds its happy place. It's a miracle. So where am I going to sew? I'm going to continue sewing right along this crease till I get to that corner. I'm going to do the same thing as I go all the way around. So I'm going to continue on. I'm going to show you that at the very end, how we're going to join the pieces, but I'm so excited to get ready for the free motion stitching, so let's go over to that, right? So this doesn't turn out to be a super long video. We'll finish this in a little bit. Okay, now, here's the fun thing. Free motion stitching, I just love free motion stitching, but it takes some practice to get how to learn how to do it, right? And there's all kinds of fun things that you can do with it. And so there's one thing that's been in quilting for forever, excuse me, is something called Trapunto. And what Trapunto is where part of the design is raised up, and it really accentuates that part of the design. So I came up with this project. I'm thinking that you could practice this on something fun like a microwave potato bag and practice the technique. So in your handout, I have an image of actually larger than a full-size potato, and the words potato bag, just in case you forget what it's for. And I have guidelines for learning how to stitch in order. Now, how are we going to get this on our fabric, right? Because that's a lot to transfer. Well, there's a super simple way to do that. It's called kitchen stitching, right? Well, what I used is I used some deli paper, and it's something that you can just pick up. It's really simple, easy to use. You could always use some stabilizer. I like this because it's kind of like a sturdy tissue paper, right? Okay, so then I take that and I lay it over the top of my image. It's easy to see through, and I trace it, and I hope you can see it. But what I do is I trace it onto the deli paper. Okay, and I can actually use like guidelines, marks, make myself some notes, because I'm going to stitch through this paper to give me the design stitching onto the fabric, right? So, and then it tears away after you're done. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our Trapunto potato, and I'm going to stitch around this potato, and I have put just a scrap of batting back where that potato is going to be. So here's the concept. I'm going to stitch around the potato. I'm going to use wash away thread, so it's going to go away later. Then on the back, we're going to trim away everything that kind of doesn't look like a potato, and then we're going to layer it and quilt it. The potato is going to have 2 layers of batting. So let's get started. So you okay with transferring design? It's a pretty cool way to do it. Now let's get this walking foot off, and we're going to change over on the top to wash away thread on the top of the machine. Let's get the red thread out. I'm going to leave the red thread in the bobbin for now. Basically what I would do though in my regular project is I would switch over to a thread in the bobbin that matches the backing of my my quilt sandwich, right? Because I don't want any leftover threads. The thread's going to stay there, and I don't want it to show through. So let's take off this walking foot. Walking foot comes, and it's put on the machine. This little fork right here attaches to the needle clamp that holds the needle in, and that's what gives it the action to go up and down to do its little walking foot kind of thing. So we're going to take it off. So there's the walking foot that comes with the Baby Lock Accomplish. It has a caution sign. Remember how I told you how the machine goes really, really fast? Well, they don't tell you, don't go too fast with a walking foot, because you can go faster than the walking foot can handle. So that's a nice big beefy walking foot. We're going to change over to free motion. Now the Baby Lock Accomplish comes with a free motion foot. It's kind of the same principle. This little bar goes on the top of that needle clamp. So when the needle comes up, it's going to create the action in the foot. So I can put the screw back in the side, put the foot on, and just tighten it on up. And we're almost there for the machine changeover. Tighten that up. We're going to thread the machine. Now the Baby Lock Accomplish, super simple, straight stitch machine. If I want to go for free motion, I put the foot on, and it's going to be complicated. You're going to watch? Boom, did it. Drop the feed dogs, and it's ready to go. So this is a really cool machine going really fast back and forth to whatever you want to do. Now, I mentioned I'm going to use some wash away thread in the top. I'm going to go around my potato, and I keep my wash away thread. I actually wind it on a little bobbin that I paint with a little bit of like nail polish, just so I know that it's different, because wash away thread goes away with water, and you do not want to accidentally leave it in the machine and sew something with it, because, my friends, it goes away with water. So Baby Lock Accomplish, it's a high-speed machine, so you have a slightly different thread pack. Let me get my arm out of the way, hopefully that you can see. I have 3 little loops up here. This takes the twist out of the thread if I am going high speed, 1500 stitches a minute. So I'm going to go through all of those, and I certainly can't lick the end of my wash away thread. Ask me how I know. It doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. Now I'm going to come here, here, oops, here, here, go through the take-up lever, boom. That's all the hard stuff so far. Now, wash away thread is a little bit fragile. If you live in a humid climate, I would absolutely keep it in a baggie for sure. But it's not super fragile, but I just treat it a little bit delicate. Now that the Accomplish has a needle threader, I'm going to bring it down, catch this thread, catch this thread, pull it on through. There we go, and ready to go. Now, what we're going to do is I am going to stitch around this potato with, went ahead and I pulled the thread out. There it is. Cool. Once it gets threaded, don't mess around with it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stitch around this potato. Great way to practice your free motion skills because it's not that big a deal. I have put pins to hold everything together. I'm going to lower the presser foot and I'm just going to stitch around the outline of the potato. In fact, this safety pin is in the way. All right, let's go. Oops, that was in the way too. Now, I want to show you what I've done so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch around the entire potato, right? Then I'm going to take my pins out. And I'm going to get my applique scissors. Now I'm going to use Quilter Select Wave Applique scissors because they are, they have like a micro serrated edge and it cuts really well, really close to that batting. I am going to stitch around my entire potato. You don't have to necessarily watch all of that. I'm going to come on up and I'm going to trim my batting very close to that stitching. Now, applique scissors have a big area on the back here. They look goofier than any other scissors that you ever have seen because what they have is that edge that comes along just like this and you can trim away all your batting. So now, I'm going to finish going around, I'm going to finish stitching around my potato. I'm going to go up to the table where it's a little bit easier to cut. I'm going to trim around that whole thing, and then when I come back, we're going to really quilt our potato, and we're going to learn how to follow the line and quilt our potato bag words. Great practice. Let me get some quilting done, and I'll see you soon. So I went ahead and I rethreaded with some white thread. It's all set up for free motion. Now I took my wash away thread out. I put it on its special little bobbin in a plastic bag labeled wash away in a special little container labeled wash away. So I shouldn't mix it up and sew an entire quilt with it. It's all safe and put away. Now, this is what the potato looked like. I went ahead and stitched all around it. Remember, I said I would use matching thread on the bottom, but I used red so that you could see it. And I just trimmed away. I laid it on a flat surface, so easy to trim around when it was laying on a flat surface. Then what we're going to do is layer it with like a traditional quilt. There's the muslin backing that I'm using. There's the cotton batting. I'm going to lay the potato over, and I have my paper still on the top, and that's going to be my guideline for doing my my stitching. So we're just going to layer that up, put a few pins in so it doesn't move around. Now this is the same process you would use if you're doing like a big quilt and you wanted to really highlight some of the areas of quilting. You would do a Trapunto, that extra layer of batting right in there. Now on a traditional quilt, you could use like a wool batting or a polyester batting, something with a little bit extra loft. This is a potato bag, so I'm not using anything that came from a dead dinosaur. I'm only using cotton, not using anything polyester or anything like that. So, okay, having said that, now we're all set up for free motion quilting. Free motion quilting is something that's best learned if you do some practice. Basically what you're going to do is you drop the feed dogs, you're the motion, and what I'm going to do is now I'm going to for realsies stitch around my potato. Let's get started by putting it right under where we want to start, and I'm going to take that top thread and I'm going to pull the bobbin thread up to the top. So I'm going to take my hand wheel, I'm going to rotate down, rotate all the way up. When I pull it away, it's going to pull that top thread through the hole of the foot, and it should pull up that bobbin thread. Now if it doesn't, just move your hand wheel a little bit and it's going to pull up that bobbin thread. Just like that. Now you have both the threads on the top. And I'm just going to hold those to the side as I get started with my free motion stitching. After a few stitches, I can let go. What I'm going to do is after I finish whatever I'm doing, I'm going to take a hand sewing needle with a large eye because it's easy to thread, and I'm going to bury the tails of those thread between the top layer and the bottom layer into the batting. So that's how you bury threads, and we'll be doing that quite a bit. That's why this is a great project to practice on, because you're stopping and starting to do the eyes of potato down here. It's a great way to practice because it's a potato bag, you know? And if you get going good, they make great gifts. Okay, so then let's stitch around the outside edge. I'm not going to worry where that other stitching was because the wash away thread's going to go away. So let's just stitch around. That's an important lesson that I forgot to do. You have to remember to lower the presser foot lever. And I got to talking and I forgot to do it. So what happens on the back is it doesn't look very pretty. Let's see. Well, not too bad, I suppose. I hope you can see that. But if you don't put the presser foot lever down, the tension is not engaged. So I'm going to pull this out. We're going to start again, but that's an important lesson to learn. If you get busy, see how easy that pulled out? You got to make sure to put that presser foot lever down. Let's do it one more time. You know the drill. We're going to go needle down, needle up, raise the presser foot lever, pull the thread up and through. Oops. There it is. Get everything in position. Stop talking. Lower the presser foot. Now we're good to go. Now this part of the potato has a little indent, and I put that in there so you could practice trying to follow the line back through. Remember, in free motion quilting you can orientate your project any way that you want to, and a good thing to do is keep the needle down when you stop free motion stitching. On the Baby Lock Accomplish, I'm going to press that button right there. When it lights up, it's going to stop with the needle down. Now I'm going to try to follow that line back out. Now, I want to stop and I want to pull my threads up just like I did at the beginning. I'm going to leave a long tail, and if I pull this thread, that bottom thread is going to pop up and stay out of my way, and I can have all my threads on the top. Later, I'm going to bury those threads. So now let me show you the potato bag, because I put this in so that you could practice following a line. And if you look at the illustration, what it has these little guidelines. There's the stop and start, and if you just follow the arrows, this stitches in one continuous line. So you don't have that many stops and starts. Yes, you're going to have to come back in the end and fill in the parts of the O's and the B's and the A's, but you have to do that with the potato eye too. So I put those marks on my paper so it helps me know where to stop and start. That's kind of one of the advantages of starting out with your design on a paper. We're going to go to the starting point. You know what to do. Now this free motion foot has like a clear area right around the needle that really helps me see that line. Before I start, I'm going to review where I'm going to go, and it's totally okay if you kind of start to feel like you're going to get lost. Just stop and relax and check out where you're going to go. I'm going to do a little bit of it, and then we're going to talk a little bit more. So notice how when I'm free motion stitching, I'm matching the speed that I'm moving the fabric to the speed that the machine is going. This machine stitches very, very fast. If I was stitching at the maximum speed of 1,500 stitches a minute, I wouldn't feel like I was in control. It's still a very responsive machine, and you can see that I was stitching pretty slow. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch around my whole potato bag. I'm going to stitch around my potato. I'm going to stitch through the eyes. Then I'm going to tear off this paper. When I tear off this paper, I'm going to do some background quilting. I might do that in red. I might do that in white. It's going to take me a little bit. It's a great time to relax, practice, get some free motion stitching in. Pour yourself a glass of iced tea. Just relax. So I'm going to finish this on up. I'm going to do my quilting on this. Then when I come back, we'll put this potato bag together, and I'll show you how we do the final part of the binding around the double-sided potholder. And our kitchen stitching is pretty close to being either a beautiful addition to our kitchen or maybe a great hostess gift. Let me finish free motion stitching and I'll be right back. So I did some stitching while you were gone. Welcome back. I did some background stitching with some red. I just finished going around and I pulled away the paper. It pulls away really super easy. I saved a piece to show you. Now, to finish this potato bag up, what I did, I just finished quilting this. Both of the top edges are finished with that binding, just like we're going to finish that potholder. And I put the wrong sides together. They're both the same size, whatever size that ends up to be, it's okay. And then I stitched 1/8 of an inch around, with them the wrong sides together. Not the right sides, the wrong sides together. What we're making is kind of a French seam, so it's nice and beautiful on the inside. So after you do that, then you go ahead and you turn it wrong side out. Push out your corners. Get everything all nice and arranged, and then you're just going to sew your traditional seam, like maybe about 1/2 inch, whatever you need to clear that previous stitching, and then that's good. The inside's going to be beautifully finished, and so if you give it as a gift or use it as a potato bag, you don't have anything showing on the inside. So pretty fast and easy that way. Step-by-step handouts. Instructions in the handout. Now remember, you don't have to do free motion stitching on this. You could make it just like this, do stitching on either side, whatever you want to do. I just thought it would be a great practice for doing free motion stitching. Now let's finish up that potholder and we're good to go. So here is the potholder. When last we were at the potholder, I went around this corner, I finished all of the corners, and I just came back to where I started, and I left 2 big tails, okay? Now, I'm going to trim them. They're going to overlap, hope you can see, and they're going to overlap the same distance that it is wide. pictures in the handout, step-by-step instructions. Now what I'm going to do, now these are kind of fussy because they have folds in them. I'm going to take them and I'm going to hold them. See if I can make you see that. There they are. I'm just going to turn them a quarter turn just like that. Find your mighty wonder clips because they are your friend. Kind of fuss with it a little bit so that you have everything kind of at a little, you're forming a little box. Extra wonder clip to tame the beast. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch from here down to here, and we're going to do a diagonal seam, and it's going to lay nice and flat when we get our binding finished. So here we go. I'm going to go from corner to corner. Threads everywhere. Here we go. Cool. Use our scissors. Take out our binding, give it a little bit of a trim, and if I did it right, it should lay nice and perfectly flat. Now that's a great way to finish off your binding. You're going to come on in, stitch down right along that seam just like you did before, then take your binding and turn it around to the back side. Now that back side is a little bit wider than the front side, but we're covering a lot of edges, aren't we? So you might want to take your scissors, make sure you trim maybe a little bit of that off, kind of fuss with it. Now's the time to take and use all your wonder clips, pull it to the back, and make sure that you're going to have coverage on the back. Once you do that, you come on in. I use matching thread. Now you can stitch in the ditch, or what I do, because this is kind of thick, right, and I'm not sure I'm going to catch that back edge, I'm going to stitch in from the top edge about 1/8 of an inch. Get to my corner and pivot. Let's see how I did. Well, I did catch it. Look at there. I did catch it on the backhand side. So if you want to stitch it again, you could come and stitch it a little bit closer. Remember, it's a potholder. It's going to be used quite a bit. Well, we covered a lot of quilting techniques, didn't we? Flip and fold, trapunto, marking it with paper, stitching on the line. We did a whole bunch of different stuff. So I hope you enjoyed yourself. Thank you for staying with me. I really enjoy quilting on the Baby Lock Accomplish. It's a great machine. We're going to send it off to George. He's going to tell you a little bit more about this awesome machine. And thank you for sticking with me today. Really appreciate it. Happy quilting.
Thanks, Kathy. Once again, that was a great presentation. Don't forget, you could click on the link to download the instructions to today's presentation. Now, the Baby Lock Accomplish is not the ordinary machine. It is a powerhouse machine that is built on a platform that is industrial quality. From the all-metal commercial rotary hook to the very unique pin feed. This pin feed actually has a pin that comes up through the fabric when the needle comes up. And so what that does, it eliminates any possibility of slippage. Use this with many of the different accessories, like shown here with the commercial quality walking foot attachment going through multiple layers of naga hide, and then also for your quilting. But also I love this flexible foot for going over denim seams and then working with sheer fabric as well. Speaking of accessories, we have this wonderful guide that guides a position for your 1/4 inch or your stitch in a ditch sewing. So this machine is perfect for the quilter, it's perfect for the bag maker, for just that high performance straight sewing that you're looking for in a sewing machine. So this machine right here is at a very special price right now. Don't wait though, we have a limited supply of these. Click on the link and order your machine today. If you have any questions, call us at 1-800-865-9300. 9664. Bye for now.